Wanna come in? Okay, come on.
Hello YouTube world, for those of you that are out there. We'll begin in just a minute. Where are we driving to now, Jeffrey?
To get some food because we are too lazy to cook.
Oh.
Gonna go get some wings.
I'm too frightened to eat out.
Are you?
Yep.
That's probably the safer bet.
Probably.
We're having pork chops and risotto
Oh, what's y'all's address? We're on the way.
at some point. What's not weak?
Home cooking's good stuff.
It's overrated. It's
Clean
overrated.
up is anyway.
Absolutely. Oh, that's not my portion. I'll just mess up all the dishes.
That's the worst part.
Chris, how many pans did you have to wash last night?
464.
It's the silverware that ticks me off because it seems like it's never ending.
My wife will be like, hey, I'm gonna heat up some baked beans, and there'll be like 7 pans in the sink, and I'll be like, how is this possible? You literally just boiled water.
And then I let him go ahead and get to washing the dishes really good. And then he's like, just about done. I'm like, oh, but we have this pan on the stove. That's always the thing.
Alright guys, tonight should be kind of short and sweet. Chapter 8 is pretty short, and we'll be able to do chapter 9 in one day, chapter 10 in one day, and then chapter 11 we're going to have to break up. So we still got about 4 weeks left, maybe 5 of this, but Daniel 8 is just a continuation on of these visions that he has, and this one's kind of important. It's kind of, I'm not going to say it's boring, because nothing in the Bible is boring, but as you're reading it, you kind of roll your eyes a little bit like, okay, we get it, but you'll understand once we go through it why it's important and why we focus on these in Daniel so much. So we'll start out, again, we're in chapter 8. We're going to start at verse 1, go all the way through it. At verse 20, we kind of get a recap. So it's only verse 1 through 19 that we really have to go through tonight. So I'll just start and we'll crank it out, and that'll be it. So in verse 1, in the 3rd year of the reign of Belshazzar the king, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, subsequent to the one which appeared to me previously. Alright, so Daniel states that the vision came to him, and that it was 2 years after the vision in chapter 7, because it's the 3rd year of the reign of Belshazzar. Which I know all this stuff in your head, you're like, whatever. So it's 2 years after the vision in chapter 7, but it's before chapter 5. Remember, chapter 5, Belshazzar dies right after Daniel reveals what the dream means. And so this vision, and this is important, happens in 551 BC. So 550 years before Christ, the vision, Daniel's having the vision, okay? That's all the information that was shoved into verse 1. So verse 2. I looked in the vision, and while I was looking, I was in the citadel of Susa. So the citadel of Susa just means the Capitol building, we'll cheat and call it a Capitol building. The Capitol building of the capital city of the Media-Persian Empire. Okay? So I looked in the vision, and while I was looking, I was in the citadel of Susa, which is in the province of Elam, which is 250 miles away from Babylon. And I looked in the vision, and I myself was beside the Ulai Canal. Then I lifted my eyes and looked, and behold, a ram, which had 2 horns, was standing in front of the canal. Now the 2 horns were long, but one was longer than the other, with the longer one coming up last. I'm going to keep going. Verse 4. I saw the ram butting westward, northward, and southward, and no other beast could stand before him, nor was there anyone to rescue from his power, but he did as he pleased and magnified himself. Okay, so the two horns are the Media-Persian Empire, with the Persian Empire being the longer horn because it lasted longer. They merged into one, which is the ram. Okay, and the Median-Persian Empire expanded very rapidly. Remember, it took over the kingdom that Daniel was captured in, and Daniel's kingdom became part of it, right? Took over Judea, took over everything all over the place. So we get to verse 5. So nothing has happened yet that we don't know about. Okay? Verse 5 is where we start to get a vision of the future. While I was observing, behold, a male goat was coming from the west over the surface of the whole earth without touching the ground, and the goat had a conspicuous horn between its eyes. So we have this first thing happening which has not already happened, which is this goat. Now remember, a ram and a goat are two totally separate animals. Okay? You have to remember, I know people are like, what? A ram is a sheep, generally speaking, or we call them a mountain goat, but it's a type of sheep, and a goat is a goat. Okay? So while I was observing, behold, a male goat was coming from the west over the surface of the whole earth without touching the ground, meaning it was moving really fast. It was moving so fast it appeared as though it wasn't touching the ground. And the goat had a conspicuous horn between his eyes. The horn is Alexander the Great. We've already talked about Alexander the Great in the last chapter. I'm not going to totally get into all that again. But just remember that Alexander the Great took over the Media-Persian Empire, and Daniel is predicting this before it happened. Okay? Well, God is predicting it through Daniel. I don't want to give Daniel credit for God's work. Verse 6. He came up to the ram that had the two horns, which I had seen standing in front of the canal, and rushed at him in his mighty wrath. So we know that Alexander the Great took over the Media-Persian Empire. I saw him come beside the ram, and he was enraged at him, and struck the ram and shattered his two horns, and the ram had no strength to withstand him. So he hurled him to the ground and trampled on him, and there was none to rescue the ram from the goat's power. Then the male goat magnified himself exceedingly, but as soon as he was mighty, the large horn was broken, and in its place there came up four conspicuous horns toward the four winds of heaven. So remember, when Alexander broke away and became really popular and big, okay, then what happened next was at the age of 33, he died. When he died, the four generals came up, took his place, and split the empire into four parts. We talked about this a lot last week. So it's kind of a reiteration of the previous vision, but now this is happening. Out of one of them came forth a rather small horn, which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the beautiful land. Okay? So the little horn, again, is a form of the Antichrist. There's two parts to this which we have to understand. So the Antichrist is all throughout history. The Antichrist is never one thing until the book of Revelation. The last battle that takes place, the Antichrist is one thing. But there are many Antichrists all throughout history. This part of the vision balances between past history and future history and mirrors both of them identical. Remember when we started studying Daniel, we were talking about how Daniel is a reflection of Christ coming. Daniel was not an example of Christ because there's only one Christ, but he was a reflection of the magnificence that was coming, that is Christ. As is these visions, they are a reflection of before Christ came and when he comes again. So both of these visions balance between two parts of history. And this is really complicated and really hard for people to get, but I want to go through this because it's really important, right? So out of one of them came forth a rather small horn, which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the beautiful land. So toward Israel and God's land. Verse 10, it grew up to the host of heaven and caused some of the host and some of the stars to fall to the earth, and it trampled them down. So in this Antichrist that came, his name is Antiochus, okay? And I may be pronouncing it wrong, but I pronounce it Antiochus. So Antiochus was he was the fourth, Antiochus the fourth, and he came and he took over the Medo-Persian Empire and the Greek Empire, sort of, or parts of it, and he was based in Syria. And what he did was he forced the Jews to give up the temple, and he sacrificed pigs on the temple altar to Zeus. Okay? Now, the worshiping of Zeus was modeled after and caused the increase in the religion of Islam. Okay? So this is called a Mohammedan delusion, right? So it's the delusion that all the Jews on earth must be killed. This is what is taking place right here. So Antiochus, this king, he starts killing all these Jews and totally messes up the temple, sacrificing pigs in it to Zeus, and he replaces all the images in the temple and steals all the gold and everything out of the temple. And the Jews eventually get so sick of him that from 167 to 166 BC, they actually revolt against him and actually throw over his empire. But it took from 171 to 165 BC before they actually defeated him and got rid of him, right? And so they battled against him for roughly a year and a half. But from 171 to 167 BC, he was just destroying them. So, verse 10 again. It grew up to the host of heaven and caused some of the host and some of the stars to fall to the earth. Okay? That's a reflection of the Jewish people losing their lives. And it trampled them down. It even magnified itself to be equal with the commander of the host, and it removed the regular sacrifice from him, and the place of his sanctuary was thrown down. Right? So the temple was totally this, whatever the word is, I can't think of the word, but made unholy, and pigs were slaughtered on the temple to Zeus. And on account of, verse 12, on account of transgression, the host will be given over to the horn along with the regular sacrifice, and it will fling truth to the ground and perform its will and prosper. Okay, so remember, I said that this is in two places in history, right? So Daniel is having a vision in 551 BC from before all of this happens in roughly 160, 170 BC, okay? Once this happens, in verse 12, we fast forward, and this gets confusing, we fast forward to the actual end times that we know of in the book of Revelation, right? So in verse 12, on account of transgression, the host will be given over to the horn along with the regular sacrifice, and it will fling truth to the ground and perform its will and prosper. Remember, at the end times, the devil completely takes over earth. There are no more believers found, and at that point is when Christ returns, right? Okay, here's the crazy thing. In verse 12, it says, I'm going to read it one more time. I know you're probably getting sick of hearing verse 12. On account of transgression, so because of transgressions that we do, the host, right? So the belief in God, our structure in Christianity and Judaism, the host will be given over to the devil. God will let the devil run rampant so that God can come back. Now, the key to understanding why we're reading this in Daniel and people get so bored of it and so frustrated by it, the key to understanding this is a vision of what is to come. So when you see things like the devil taking over, or evil taking over and Christ being replaced, you know that what Daniel had a vision of, what Daniel was thinking of, what Daniel dreamt about is taking place. That should kind of freak you out a little bit. And I'm going to get into that at the end of all this, because if you have not read the book of Revelation and understood it, you might want to start. We've done Bible study in church. It's very difficult. I would love to do another one soon, just on that book alone. But the key thing to remember, that I keep repeating this, but it's so important. Daniel is having visions that we know for a fact have come true. He had them 400 years before they happened. So if he's talking about the end of the world, and he's already proven the first half of his vision to be true, then the end of the world vision is going to be true as well. It should cement your belief in Christ and should solidify your faith. That is what the book of Daniel is all about. It's about being more faithful, right? So when we read the book of Daniel, we read these visions and we're all like, all this symbolism and stuff, it's so confusing. Well, it's actually not, because you just need to back up and look at the 20,000 foot view and see that Daniel proved his vision was correct. Therefore, Christ is Christ. He did exist. He did rise out of the grave. He is your Lord and Savior. You need to do what he asks, because you don't want to be there when God removes himself because of our transgressions, right? So literally, and this falls on deaf ears anytime you say it, but literally you are responsible for the end times not arriving, because the end times don't arrive until there's the true end times. The last battle does not happen until there are no more believers left. That is why Daniel is so important. Anyway, so that's just verse 12, right? So verse 12, we flash forward, and we also stay in this time because it's a reflection of both places, right? I know that's kind of confusing. Verse 13. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to that particular one who was speaking, how long will the vision about the regular sacrifice apply, while the transgression causes horror, so as to allow both the holy place and the host to be trampled? Okay, now we're back in normal time. He's again talking about the vision that is going to happen in 170 to 160 BC, okay? So it's two angels speaking, and one angel asks the other one, how long is this going to be allowed to happen? And he answered, he said to me, so he answered to Daniel, even though the other angel asked, for 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the holy place will be properly restored. Okay, so 2,300 evenings and mornings is 2,300 days, right? 2,300 days is roughly 6.5 years. It's actually 6.4 years, okay? Antiochus reigned for, guess how long? 6.5 years. For almost exactly, we can't pinpoint dates exactly because we have a hard time with it, but up until, I believe, December, strangely enough, December 25th of 165 BC, was the 2,300th day of Antiochus's reign. So here's the nuts thing, right? Here's what drives me crazy. We're reading a book that Daniel, about a vision that Daniel had in 551 BC, where he literally called out the exact number of days that a king would reign 400 years later. And we want to doubt anything that is written in this book ever. We got to be crazy, right? So then it goes on. That kind of breaks up that whole thing. Now we sort of shift gears here for a little bit, and we get to meet Angel Gabriel for the first time. I believe he's the only, I could be wrong about this, forgive me if I am, I believe he's the only angel named in the Bible, which I think is really cool. And his name actually means like big, huge, strong dude, roughly, right? So imagine if you're Daniel and you see Gabriel, you're going to be a little freaked out because big, huge, strong dude who has the countenance of God is standing in front of you, right? So here, this is when this happens. So verse 15. When I, Daniel, had seen the vision, I sought to understand it, and behold, standing before me was one who looked like a man, right? But the word man means like, man, not like, regular Joe guy. And I heard the voice of a man between the banks of Ulai, and he called out and said, Gabriel, give this man an understanding of the vision. So God commands his angels, right? He not only does he call Gabriel by name, but he says, hey Gabriel, tell Daniel what all of this means. So he came near to where I was standing, and when he came, I was frightened and fell on my face. Yeah, I would too, right? So the angel comes over to tell him what all of this means. Daniel literally falls on the ground. But he said to me, Son of man, understand that the vision pertains to the time of the end. Right? So the vision that he had pertains to the time of the end. And this is where we get into this confusing thing of dipping our feet into both pools. Okay? So it was the time of the end before Christ came. Right? The end of Antiochus ushered in this era getting ready for Christ to arrive, which was the end of an epoch, the end of an era. And it also is a vision about the end time when Jesus comes back. Right? Alright, we're almost there. So verse 18. Now while he was talking with me, I sank into a deep sleep with my face to the ground. Literally, Daniel passes out because he's so freaked out that this angel is standing in front of him. Right? Not literally passes out in life, but actually passed out in the vision. I know sometimes when we read stuff we have a hard time understanding it, but that's what it means when it says I fell asleep with my face to the ground. It means he was standing up and he went poof and just literally fell out, right? But in the middle of verse 18, but he touched me and made me stand upright. So the angel literally grabs Daniel and makes him finish understanding this vision because it is so important. So even though Daniel literally was physically not capable of absorbing what was happening, it terrified him so much, the angel made him go through it, made him see it and understand it. Right? So he said, behold, I am going to let you know what will occur at the final period of indignation, for it pertains to the appointed time of the end. So there's our explanation of why we're dipping our feet into both pools, right? I'll read that one more time. Behold, I'm going to let you know that what will occur at the final period of indignation, for it pertains to the appointed time of the end. So when Antiochus comes, that's the period of indignation when the temple is blasphemed, right? But the angel specifically says, but this also relates exactly to the end times. The ram which you saw, and this is just the explanation, okay? The ram which you saw with the two horns represents the kings of Media and Persia. The shaggy goat, in verse 21, represents the kingdom of Greece, and the large horn that is between his eyes is the first king. The broke horn and the four horns that arose in its place represent four kingdoms which will arise from his nation, although not with his power. Right? And the him is Alexander the Great. In the latter period of their rule, when the transgressors have run their course, a king will arise, insolent and skilled in intrigue. His power will be mighty, but not by his own power, and he will destroy to an extraordinary degree and prosper and perform his will in little his. He will destroy mighty men and the holy people. Right? So destroying of holy people is something that really frightens me. So if we're reading a vision from Daniel that we know he was at least 50% right on, down to the number of days that the king served, then I'm going to pay attention to what is written here about the future. You cannot destroy somebody that is holy. Okay? If you're saved, can you ever be destroyed? The answer is no. In fact, technically, although you physically die, you don't suffer death. Because the moment that you physically die, you're in paradise with Jesus, as he promised to the crook on the cross, right? To the thief on the cross. So, and although the permanent heaven has not been established yet, you still reside with Christ. So if holy people are being destroyed, what does that mean? That means people that are acting in faith, or of the faith, or acting like Christians but aren't truly professed with their heart to be of Christ, are going to die. That terrifies me. Not for my sake, but for their sake. Because they believe, because of the world we live in, it is so easy to mislead people and have them comfortable in their belief in Christ when it's actually not real belief. And the church does a horrible job of getting people to understand that you have to have a personal relationship with Christ. He has to change your life. There have to be things that happen to you that you recognize, not for anybody else, but that you recognize are important enough that you realize that you're being changed by an outside force. Okay? So when it says he will destroy mighty men and the holy people, that literally means that he's killing people that think they're holy but aren't. Okay? That is going to happen in the future. But look at what is written here, because this also freaks me out. Verse 24. His power will be mighty, but not by his own power. Remember, we read earlier that God allowed the transgressor to transgress. Right? So literally, the power of God is given to destroy the evil people. At some point, and people have a hard time, like, people always say, well, if God is so loving, how can he send people to hell? Okay, God doesn't send people to hell. God sent you an invitation. You don't accept the invitation. You send yourself to hell. Okay? When God releases the devil and allows him to use the power that God owns to cause destruction on earth, the people that are saved don't suffer. Because even if you perish physically, you're with Christ and you are way better off than you ever were. So when we read this, you have to stomach it, and it's hard to stomach. But God literally allows the destruction of evil, but he has to at some point, right? At some point, God has to say, okay, I have given it enough time. People have had enough time to reach other people. People have had enough time to teach the Bible. People have had enough time to baptize. I've given them enough time. Only the people that are saved are saved. No more will be saved. I'm unleashing the devil. That I don't want to be around for. And whether that's like a slow burn, like, a frog boiling in a pot sort of thing, and it's happening right now, and we just don't realize it because it's like, slowly building, or if it just comes on all at once, I have no idea, but it frightens the tar out of me. And if this dude could count the number of days that the king that didn't exist was going to reign, I'm paying attention to it. I am seriously paying attention to it. Huh?
I wouldn't want to be there for that.
No. And look at this, verse 20, it gets even worse. And because this makes me think of today. And through his shrewdness, he will cause deceit to succeed by his influence. Right? So he will cause people to believe lies. Y'all know I'm super psycho about evolution. I can't stand Darwinian theory. It's the stupidest thing ever. Right? And, I have no problem with a group of lizards that live in one region growing a longer tail than a group of lizards that live in another region, or a turtle being a different color here than it is there. That's not evolution. They're still both turtles and lizards. That lie is taught to us to remove the Creator from our lives, right? For us to stop worshiping the Creator and start worshiping the creation, because the creation is the thing that is changing and evolving. The Creator didn't create it. Okay? That is just one deception that has happened since the 1950s. Now think about all the other deceptions that are taking place, right? Think about all the churches that are teaching false doctrine. That people are too lazy to read their Bibles and actually figure it out for themselves, right? I am a huge proponent of everybody reading your Bible, even if you don't enjoy it. Read it. You'll be amazed at what you can learn. People are being misled all over the place.
100%.
So he will cause deceit to succeed by his influence. So the devil will literally influence deceit so that it seems truthful. People will believe things that aren't true. And he will magnify himself in his heart, and he will destroy many while they are at ease. Remember what I said about the holy people being killed? What is the easiest way to kill a non-Christian and send them to hell? Make them believe they're a Christian and they're saved. And put them at ease where they're not chasing Jesus. Where they're not working hard to make sure that they are fully saved, that they have a full relationship, right? I know I torture you all the time. I tell you all the time, if you are a long-term Christian, question your salvation. It is good for you, right? Challenge yourself to make sure you are saved. That's an exercise that does not put you at ease. It's an exercise that frightens you, but it's a good exercise because if you're at ease, there could be other things at play, right? Now, let me be careful here. I don't want to send anybody off the deep end. I am completely at ease that I am going to heaven. I am completely at ease that Jesus is my Lord and Savior. What I am not at ease at is that I'm serving Him properly. And that's what I mean by test your faith, right? Test your salvation.
Will you say that again?
Yeah. I am completely at ease that when I die, I'm going to heaven. Like, I have no doubt, right? What I'm not at ease at is am I serving Him correctly? Okay? So my challenge to myself to maintain that I am actually saved is to know that I'm falling short and try and change that everywhere that I can, right? That's what I mean by challenge your salvation. Make sure you're saved. Jesus has something for us all to do. You may be like Daniel and wait 60 years for it to happen. Who knows? But challenge it anyway, right? So He will destroy many while they are at ease, and will even oppose the Prince of Princes. So He'll even oppose the power of Jesus, right? But He will be broken without human agency. We love to think that we can defeat the devil, right? We don't have anything to do with it in the final battle. We're in the army of God, but God is the one that holds the power, and God is the one that defeats the devil in the end, right? So this is literally a reading of the book of Revelation to the T. Verse 26, we're almost done. The vision of the evenings and mornings which has been told is true, but keep the vision secret, for it pertains to many days in the future. Right? So when we read the word secret, what do you think? Don't tell anybody. Right? The word translation here is a little messed up. What this secret means is actually more like protected. Keep it
sacred.
Yeah, keep it hidden, not from eyes so people can't read it, but keep it hidden so it can't be changed, because it is so correct. Right? That's what it means, keep it secret. Verse 27 says, Then I, Daniel, was exhausted and sick for days. Could you imagine? I mean, I would probably be pretty freaked out if I was standing there talking to Gabriel, even if it was just in a vision, right? I was exhausted and sick for days, and then I got up again and carried on the king's business. I love this. What does Daniel do immediately after this vision? He doesn't just walk off into the woods and sit on a tree stump and be like, I'm just going to hang out here. He just gets back to doing what God called him to do. God put him in the position to serve whatever king he was in front of. As soon as this vision's over and he's well enough, he just goes back to serving. He's like, back to doing what God called me. No messing around, nothing, no excuses. Look at this. It's the last little bit of this verse. But I was astounded at the vision, and there was none to explain it. So even after the angel sat with him and was like, this means this means this means this, because he's seeing the future, it doesn't make sense to him. So you can talk about a goat coming that is Greece, and he's like, what's Greece? Like, who is Alexander the Great? What are you talking about? Because none of these things exist, because it is in the future. So this is why this is so important. I know I've already talked about this, but I want to close with this real quick. If the book of Daniel was so exact, and we know God was involved in writing the entire Bible, then we had better get to paying attention to what is written in the New Testament.
Absolutely.
Like, literally, for the love of God, we need to get better at understanding what is in the New Testament, what Jesus is asking us, what He really wants from us, right? That's part of the reason why we're going through the Ten Commandments, is because all of this is tied together in us really understanding. We have to understand and say it out loud. Everything in the Bible is 100% true, and we must rest our faith in it, even if we don't understand it. Okay?
Yep.
Daniel was the most faithful person in the Bible other than Jesus. He was more faithful than Moses. He was more faithful than Abraham. Probably Abraham was probably a close second, and people are like, what? More faithful than Abraham? Remember, Abraham cheated on his wife to have a baby because he didn't believe God would provide it, okay? Moses banged on the rock out of anger because everybody's whining about being thirsty. Daniel didn't have these issues. Daniel was the most faithful person in the Bible other than Jesus. We've got to listen to this stuff that he writes, even though it's hard to read. All right? Next week, Daniel chapter 9. We'll be able to get through the whole thing just like we did tonight. This Sunday, we're doing commandment number 3. It's one of my faves. It's going to be good fun. For those of you who are watching who live in the local area of Southeast Georgia, tomorrow is not going to be a great day. Y'all be careful and keep your either cell phone or weather radio or whatever nearby. I've heard it's actually going to be pretty intense around here. So
I'm leaving.
Huh?
I'm leaving.
I'm leaving. Yeah. Anyway, y'all take care. I love you. Thank you for joining me. If you're on YouTube, love y'all. Have a great night and look forward to seeing you Sunday morning.